The January board meeting in the Hudson River Black River Regulating District. Roll call, Mr. Leslie.
Chairman Finkel,
Here.
Mr. Hayes,
Here.
Mr. Rosenthal,
Here.
Mr. DeWitt,
Here.
Mr. Byrd,
Here.
Mr. Callahan,
Here.
Mr. Leslie here, Mr. Fulton,
Here.
Mr. Minicha,
Here.
Mr. Hodgkin,
Here.
and Ms. Rozicki.
Here.
All present.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt the meeting agenda. No need to revise.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr.
Rosenthal.
No further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We have one person who's requested to speak, and it is Peter, I'm sorry, I can't read it,
Reitzel,
sorry.
that's fine.
You're on, sir?
I'm on.
Spell the last name, please, first.
Spell the last name.
My last name is Reutzzel.
I can't hear from this distance. Here.
It's Reutzzel.
Over there, that's fine.
You got it?
This is fine.
You could go up by Mr. Bird. That would be
Okay.
great.
That's right. You can go and back
Stand
by
up
that
next
door,
to Mr. Byrd,
and then you can,
Okay.
John, you can rotate it
Excellent.
back, I guess.
That's good.
and-
That's great.
First of all, very nervous to be speaking in front of anybody. I'm not very good at it, but I thank you for giving me the opportunity. I guess I'm looking for some advice, some help as far as acquiring some beach rights that have been in my family since 1962. On 159 now North Shore Road is where my grandparents built the place. My parents adopted it. I've been there since I was born, basically as a camp and a summer home. Used to spend a lot of my time with my grandparents. I've had a long history here. Unfortunately, my father has passed. My mom's in a nursing home, and we need to sell the property. And I'd like to be able to keep a small portion of that beach for my grandkids and my children to grow up on as well. I know it's not the norm, but I think I am asking for some help with that. I know you guys have the ability to change rules on occasion. And like I say, it's been in my family for a long time. It's been a part of my life, and I'd like to continue to have it as part of my children's life. And any help that you could give me with this, that would be greatly appreciated by all.
How big a parcel is it? What's the?
It's a 100-foot front right now. My name is on the deed, my name, my mom, and my two sisters. Our name is on the deed of the house as of now. And if I could retain a portion of it for our use, it'd be a wonderful thing.
What happened?
Well, my dad had passed away and my mom is in a nursing home, and there's not one of us individually that could afford to keep the home. I live directly behind it. My house is behind my mom's house. I moved there to take care of them and use the lake.
Anybody have any questions or?
I will get some information from him and maps of his property in the surrounding area and see what we can do
I
if.
can't hear John.
I'm going to get some information from Peter and his map of his property and his mom's property and see if there's any way that it's possible to do something.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we will look
I
into
guess
it.
that's it.
Yeah.
I thank you for any help that you can give me. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
opportunity.
Next, approval of the December 10th, 19th regular board meeting minutes. We have a motion to accept.
Make I'll make that motion.
Second? Any comments, additions, or corrections?
Done.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, at the report of our executive director, Mr. Cowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Several notable items during this past reporting period. Probably the most, certainly the most notable was the cyber intrusion that the regulating district experienced. Before introducing a guest to talk a little more about that and take questions, I just want to note the patience and the professionalism of the regulating district staff in dealing with this event. It was extremely disruptive. Folks kept a positive attitude. They worked through the issues. They took the information when we were able to get it, did what was asked, and in many cases recreated a great deal of material, especially material that had been updated or created between the 17th and 27th of December. So first and foremost, let me just commend to the board the exemplary actions of regulating district staff throughout and across the board. But I've asked Tush Nikolai of LogicalNet to come this morning. Several board members have expressed questions and pointed out articles in local papers about other agencies that were impacted by the same event. And I thought Tush could take us quickly through it and address any questions that the board might have. Tush, thank you for being here.
Thank you. How you doing?
Good.
As you probably all read, on December 25th, LogicalNet experienced a cyber attack. And the nature of this attack was purely from a standpoint of encrypting files for customers and holding those files hostages. When we discovered this at 2 a.m. on Christmas morning, our staff immediately responded, and within 10 minutes we actually had the servers, the management server that was the point of attack, locked down, and then we went into like the mode of trying to figure out exactly what was the nature of this attack, collecting data, and immediately we went into remediation once we recognized customers that were affected. There was a handful of customers, and obviously, Hudson River, Black River Regulating District was affected as well. The management server that we use is also used to push out updates, enables us to remotely manage these computers, so the cyber attack managed to get a hold of access to that server. Now, in terms of how they got access to that server is still under investigation. We've a couple of things that we've done is we've hardened the facilities, we've added two-factor authentication, which we were in the process of doing anyway. It's one of those things where you have it in your schedule for January, but couldn't come any sooner. So it's still under investigation as to what happened. Now, as it pertains to the Hudson River, Black River Regulating District, it was kind of a perfect storm because we were in the midst of migrating all your services from a previous provider onto our platform. And I believe we were in the midst of migrating the email services, and I understand that went pretty well. The unfortunate part is that for the Hudson River, Black River Regulating District, the backups were still continuing to be managed by your previous provider because we wanted to make sure that the onboarding goes well. And it turned out that I believe the Albany location, the backups were like sometime in mid-December, and I think the backups here, the last snapshot was like a couple of months ago or so. Again, typically, if we had been managing the backups at the time, the Hudson River Black River would have not suffered any loss because we would have gone right back to the previous. If the attack happened at 2 a.m., we would have gone back to like midnight or something, But it's unfortunate that there was some data loss. Now, our major concern was at the time, like when you're faced with these type of situations, is a data compromise, you know. That brings it up into a whole new level in terms of data breach, you know, was there any documents or anything that was siphoned out of the servers, and the answer is no, you know. Now, of course, as you read in the media, so I think at this stage, we've recovered those files. We're continuing, I'm not sure we're quite finished with the complete onboarding, maybe we are, you know,
Very close.
very close to it. Once, you know, going forward, you know, obviously we're always concerned about the security and the protection of our customers, and we've been in business for 25 years. And this never happened, but you know, you probably read out there that the managed service provider industry, and you know, we're working with the FBI, it is a key target, you know, to some of these cyber hackers. Around the same time, actually, Synoptics, another much larger company out of California, got hit on the same fashion and form, you know. When something like this happens, it actually questions the entire nature of the industry, but I think we'll make this, you know, go through. With respect to the airport, it's, you know, you might have heard some things as far as, you know, whether we're engaged or we're not. Up until Friday, we were officially engaged, so, you know, sometimes the media always gets it wrong. The nature of the airport is we were not managing the backups for the Albany International Airport. We were assisting under the direction of the IT director there and the system administrator. Had we had full management, I can assure you that not a single piece of information would have been lost and they would have not been victim to cyber attacks. You know, our whole goal is to continue to service our customers. You know, it's unfortunate that sometimes things like this hit the media and it creates all kinds of sensations. You know, I do want to make it very clear. You know, I met with the leadership yesterday of the Albany International Airport, the CFO and the CEO and so forth. And when the paper had called, you know, the worst thing you could do is he's not. You know, Logical Line is not available for comment. The reality of it is. The Times Union had called at 5:22 p.m., left a message on one of my not my voicemail, but one of our staff members' voicemail to gain a comment. So, and of course, you know, papers have news has a very short cycle, so we're always available for comment on that. You know, the nature of the industry. I mean, everybody's vulnerable. That's just the nature of it. You know. However, and every networks are always on constant attack. You know, we're familiar with the process. We protect customers on a daily basis. You know, we have a team that are just dedicated to this type of stuff. You know, there's nothing unique about this attack. I mean, it's happened, you know, on many other cases. We continue to cooperate with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. They have a whole task force that is dedicated to this particular group, if you will. And, you know, if you're in this particular virus, you know, so, you know, going forward, I think, as the saying goes, you know, you get better with situations like this. So, but, you know, if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have a question.
Sure.
My concern goes back, sir, sorry it's remote.
Yep.
To my reading and then distribution of the Wall Street Journal
Yep.
article that said that cyber attacks, among other areas, are focused on dams so as to prevent the regulating authorities to control those dams and giving rise to floods, wreaking havoc
Correct.
with waters. But my question is twofold. This current cyber attack, what is its impact agency-wide on I'm not a technical person, so I apologize.
Sure.
What is the impact more broadly on our ability to safeguard our dams and things of that nature? And what, if anything, is being done or needs to be done to ensure the protection of our operation. And I guess there's a third part of it. What exactly in lay terms, so that I can understand, was breached and what was not breached?
Right. Nothing was breached. Breached, the nature of actually pulling information and having information out there on the web. So from that perspective, no data was compromised in terms of having information out there.
So what happened?
So
What happened?
So the nature of this virus is, its sole purpose is to encrypt files on customers' computers. Encrypting meaning it locks them down, so it's purely designed from perspective of getting money to decrypt it. So they encrypt the files, and then they have the key to decrypt those files, basically. And so
Ransom.
basically it's ransomware, exactly. Now, with respect to protecting the environment, the Hudson River, Black River, it's true that some of these hackers, this particular one was for ransom, but there are cyber attacks out there. Their very goal is to gain control of infrastructure, right, and wreak havoc. The power grids, dams, so forth. One of the things that we do is, since we're managing all your firewalls, there are things that I think we've hardened it pretty well. I mean, that's the best you can do to protect the data so that there's no information out there that might be sensitive enough to, that the hackers can gain access to. So that's the, data protection is the first priority. In terms of, we have, for the firewalls, if there's any network breaches, we have an alert system, both automated and human intervention to see to it that, no one is gaining access. Now, going forward, there might be, but there are two-factor authentication that we're introducing for all our clients, but, with security also comes some degree of inconvenience, It's unfortunate, but these are things that, how do you introduce new processes, if you will, and new technologies to further enhance the security of any customer for that matter. So the two things, two-factor authentication will help quite a bit, and that's something we'll talk about, how we're going to roll it out. There's also, there's dark web monitoring that what we've done is we've introduced, we've actually just implemented in the last 3 weeks, right? We've implemented more pieces and, invested in more technology than, we've done in the last 6 months, right? So the dark web monitoring is simply to continue to monitor, what's going on in terms of, vulnerabilities from a user's perspective. So any organization can monitor their organization, their domain, to see who's being clumsy with their passwords, what might actually be out there, and so we're implementing that. The third piece is we've launched what's called security awareness training. Security is a collaboration. I mean, there's only, we obviously are going to protect the infrastructure. However, sometimes providing security awareness training to our customers and the staff. So, we have training for sexual harassment and all that in the workplace. So that's a new piece that we've invested in to provide to customers. Because, you can have all the protection in the world, and if you have, the user behind that screen doing something that maybe they shouldn't be doing, or there might be some other strain of virus out there that the virus protection companies that offer these services may not detect. It's also a user, it's doing some training on that. So.
And if I may, let me just address another element of Mr. Rosenthal's question, which is operational impacts or the ability of a malicious actor to take control of any of our water control structures. We manage those structures, and the chief engineer will correct and expand on my remarks as necessary here, on site. So we do not have
There's no availability.
remote online access, although there are structures certainly within the US and around the world that are susceptible to that for that reason, because they can be controlled remotely. So in terms of our operational impacts, that is an area of risk that we do not have. Contrarily, when this attack happened, we were still in a different environment for our emails, so communications and the ability to be in touch via the servers were impacted. Now, having migrated successfully to Outlook 365, that is a vulnerability that we will not have going forward. I just also do want to note that Mr. Fultan, Mr. Manisha, and I did meet last week on site with Tush and his team. One of the things that we talked about, again, a lesson learned from this past event and the way we were set up with backups at the time, were that our different servers were treated differently and backed up in different ways. So going forward, we're going to treat every server the same. We're going to have the same safeguards in place. And as I understand it, again, I'm no more technical than you, Mr. Rosenthal, so I'll probably get this wrong, but the idea here is to be able to respond and fully recover better and more quickly after a future attack, which will inevitably, we hope not soon, but as you said, they're coming all the time. There are bad actors in the world that do this for a business. So the idea is, number one, prevent a future attack, which we're talking about, but also very importantly, be able to recover with less pain than we went through in this last event. So I'm confident that we are going to be in that environment moving forward.
Oh, absolutely. In fact,
Another article this morning, the Iranians are coming apparently.
yeah, for all the customers, and there were a handful of them that were impacted in the same process, and we were managing backups. The recovery was pretty quick. It's basically the way the nature of backups work is if something went wrong, whether it's infected or it got corrupted or the server crashes, there's various factors that can that can damage your data. We were able to basically take the previous day's snapshot or the previous snapshot and just basically open that, the previous backup. So, and you're correct that the backups, for whatever reason, in Albany and here, were being treated differently. We view the world backup as backup, right? It doesn't matter where your servers are. So I think going forward, they will be treated the same, although there might be two different servers, but the process is the same. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Any other
Thank you
questions?
very much.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, your data is safe with us. It's unfortunate when it hits the media, we spend a lot more time, delivering the message than actually doing the work, because I think our process and procedures are pretty solid. And in this case, it's still under investigation as to how and why, and they got hold over of the management server, but it is protected. It's a lesson learned, and we're going to continue to learn more lessons. Hopefully not under these circumstances. So, okay.
Thank you, Tush.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, continuing with my report, the full report can be found on page 11. Just hit a couple other salient points, if I may. Staying on IT for a moment, in my Coast Guard and previous tugboat captain life, I've had a lot of adventure, climbing up fishing trawlers in the middle of the night in the North Atlantic, then having car carriers bear down on me in the middle of the night in the New York Harbor. I don't think I've ever experienced so much adventure as trying to establish a video link for a Hudson River Board River Regulated District meeting. This is, it's new every time, it's exciting, but I do want to reinforce with the board my intention to take that part of excitement out of our lives by establishing a dedicated, easy to use, seamless video conferencing system that anybody can easily log on to from any location. Stephanie Rizicki has been assisting me with chasing down a equipment list that we are looking at, seeing if that equipment is on state contract. As I think many members of the board know, we did receive a video conferencing proposal from our previous IT consultant. It was cost prohibitive, so we've gone back to the drawing board. This is a source of consternation to me, and I'm sure many of the board members. This should be very easy to do, and my goal is to get there quickly so that we have less uncertainty going forward. So please know that I'm continuing to work on that with the assistance of my colleagues, and we're committed to establishing that. I do also want to note, planning is proceeding well on our open house here at the Sacandaga Field Office for January 25th, which will be from 11 to 3. Many members of the team here, including Stephanie and John, Dan Kiskis and Danielle Thorne, Gina Bowman, working hand in glove with other partners around the reservoir within the Safe Lake Initiative community and beyond. Certainly Baker Public Relations has been instrumental in helping us put this together. We've gotten a great response so far. I think it's important, as we did last summer with the Open House of Stillwater, to reinforce what we do, what our mission is, how we do it, have people engage with us in a way that is not them simply showing up with their checkbook and writing a check, but also importantly this year, for the second year in a row, the lake level a little bit elevated and recent warm temperatures, certainly raising concerns about ice safety. That'll be a big focus of this event as well. And we are partnering with the New York State Snowmobiling Association and the Sacandaga Snowmobile Club to do some safety training and awareness surrounding those issues as well. So we're excited about this. We hope members that are local that weekend can join us. But again, that's shaping up to be an important element of our messaging out to the public and connecting with our stakeholders and members of the public. I do want to, on that note, mention Baker PR is here today. Some of you know to do some headshots and some interviews for the website and social media content. I just also want to note, as recently discussed with the chair, that this month, January, ends our 6-month contract with Baker PR. Having put together with their help the centennial celebration of the Black River area and increased our social media presence for instance on Facebook, with about 250 people following when we started, to over 300 likes and over 1,400 following us now on Facebook, building on the previous successes of our newsletter, and doing great work together in terms of getting on local media outlets to help educate the public about what we do. So, we talked about getting ourselves on a plateau where we could continue that good work and sustain it, and I think that build out over the last 6 months has been very successful and instrumental in getting us to this point. So I thank the board for their support of this initiative and bringing them on, and with certainly with Barry and Grace here today, I want to thank them very much, along with Megan Baker, for their great work on our behalf. And just the only other thing I'll note, and I know Mr. Hodgson will note this more thoroughly in his update, is, and I encourage the board members that are here today to take a moment and thank her personally at the end of today's meeting, but Sue Fisco will be moving on this month from the regulating district after over 20 years. I just want to note how impressed and really inspired I have been listening to Sue deal with members of the public that come in with particular concerns or problems, permit issues. Very compassionate, professional, helpful, everything that we would want and we aspire to be, certainly in state government, and she embodies the very best in that. So I know she will be missed. We'll have occasion to wish her well in the next couple of weeks, more on that, but I just want to note that as well. And with that, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, take any questions that the board might have.
Anyone have any questions? So if I,
Just one. Any thoughts about repeating the open house sometime in the spring before the voting season to address those
Yes, we've talked about, we had Mr. Rosenthal, we had a summertime open house of Stillwater last year. We recognize that this is a time of year when a lot of people are not around at the reservoir. We also do recognize that we have other facilities, certainly the Great Sacandaga Lake being the mothership, as it were, or maybe the Death Star, depending on what kind of day John Hudson is having. But certainly takes up a great deal of our time and attention, as it should. So whether that's this summer or this spring or soon thereafter, I think it's an idea with some merit. One of the reasons we did look to schedule one over the winter this year were the benefits of taking advantage of some of those ice safety issues that we can reinforce. But we'll certainly talk to you more about that, Mr. Rosenthal, and look forward to doing something again during the summer or spring months.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Callahan.
And it's in his notes, but note that the 25th is a Saturday and it's from 11 to 1. So that means maybe more of our board members can get there. Any other questions or comments on the director's report?
On the ice safety issue, John, and I yield to Mr. Leslie. Over the years, and I can't remember the situation, we were involved either through Snowmobile Club or the town board, but as far as ice safety and putting up like notices that there was thin ice or danger, we as an organization would be assuming any liability because of that.
Yeah, we would certainly seek the advice of my esteemed counsel to my right, but certainly that's not something that we would do.
I'm just throwing that out for awareness, I guess.
For that reason, if we attempted to, and the messaging we've done about ice safety is consult your local organizations, consult the Fisheries Federation, consult snowmobile clubs. Make sure you, we've shared, for instance, the Department of Environmental Conservation and State Parks have websites devoted to ice safety. We would never represent that the ice is either safe or not, or rather, for the reasons you articulate, but rather seek to acquaint people that want to recreate over the winter with those best practices, standards, and safety sources of safety information that are out there already.
Catch-22 situation, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Yes, sir.
But I just thought I'd throw it out there for the
Right.
floors.
It's more an awareness campaign than marketing hazards, for instance.
Right.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Then we will move on. Excuse me, voice. Contracts and actions. Resolution approving acceptance of credit and debit cards presented by applicants for access permit system transactions. Mr. Minnie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Staff is pleased to seek this resolution from the board authorizing the district to accept payment via credit or debit card for access permit system transactions. For the sake of time, I'm going to use the term credit card as a bit shorthand for both credit and debit cards. Before walking you through what we're proposing and how we got here, I'd like to thank the team, which includes Stephanie Rizicki, Sue Visco, Stephanie Porter, and Anna Tracy for their commitment to making this service enhancement happen. I'd also like to thank John Callahan and Rob Leslie for their help in improving the clarity of the resolution and policy document that you have before you. Accepting payment via credit cards is not, in the year 2020, what some would characterize as a disruptive innovation. The Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada has had a best practice on this since 2009. That said, the district...
Mr. Minuccia, can you speak more directly into the microphone?
Would you like to switch seats with me?
I can.
Thank you.
Apologies.
Accepting payment via credit cards is not in the year 2020 what some would characterize as a disruptive innovation. The Government Finance Officers Association of the United States and Canada has had a best practice on this since 2009. That said, the district, like in so many other aspects of our operation, could not easily go out on its own and start accepting credit cards. It required and ultimately benefited from the approval and steps taken by other New York State entities. New York State Office of General Services made a credit card payment technology award toward the end of 2012. Like with other goods and services, buying off the OGS contract saves organizations like the district substantial time and money in the long run. The district began this particular journey in 2016 when it undertook a survey of access permit holders to gauge their interest in paying by credit card. The majority of the respondents indicated a desire to pay in this way, as have most, if not all, of the district's board members. The district began to evaluate its ability to accept payment via credit card with the assistance of interactive media consultants. The principal finding from this analysis provided to the district in December 2016 was that the district's access permit database and website needed a substantial redesign for a host of reasons, including the website's inability to allow payments via credit card. With this show of support from access permit holders and improvements to the database and website slowly coming to fruition, the district in 2017 began the two-step procurement process of seeking approval to procure the point of sale payment technology as stipulated by OGS. The district submitted the required lengthy, detailed application, which the Division of the Budget approved 4 months later. Having achieved this milestone, the district submitted the second detailed application in October 2017, this time to OGS and their vendor as stipulated in the OGS procurement process. Regrettably, approval from OGS was not nearly as quick as it was from DOB. Not until early 2019 did OGS authorize the district to purchase the point-of-sale payment technology via its contract. During this period of nearly 15 months, the district communicated dozens of times with OGS and IMC by phone, email, and face-to-face meeting to provide additional information and to seek approval to move forward. The district went so far as to even resubmit its entire application. We did not provide the records of all of this communication with OGS and IMC to you, but certainly can do that if you desire to review these records. Within the last 12 months, the district has purchased and installed the point-of-sale payment technology. Within the last 2 months, it has tested and trained staff on use of this technology and has designed a process that duly authorized and trained staff will use in accepting payment via credit card. That process is described in the policy document accompanying the resolution. The highlights include acceptance of Visa, MasterCard, and Discover. The district will not store any payer personal information for the reasons that we just spent a fair amount of time talking about. And the district will absorb the fees that come with acceptance of payment via credit card. While the journey has been long and has overcome a number of operational and technological obstacles, district staff are excited about the opportunity to offer this service to access permit holders and seekers, and they're optimistic that it will be successful. While we are initially seeking to roll this out via in-person acceptance, we expect to waste no time in expanding it to acceptance over the phone and in the not-too-distant future via the district website. This last enhancement will need to be done carefully, given all that we've read about the security risks associated with online payments. When we believe we have designed and tested such a process, we'll be back to the board with another resolution seeking approval to further improve the experience of access permit holders and seekers. Thank you for the opportunity to share this summary of the district's path to credit card acceptance. We look forward to hearing any comments and answering any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you.
I have a comment. For the record. Respectfully, Mr. Minucci, I know that you're more recently on board. and your elicitation of the chronology, while informative, is also troubling in its enlightenment. My frustration is illustrated by any number of examples. One of which is that in 1996 or 1997, when I was in state service, there was a task force and we initiated a program statewide. And rather than go back to Adam and Eve, what's frustrating is that the Department of Motor Vehicles can presently and for many years now process registrations, licenses, applications, as well as sister agencies accepting online applications and credit card payments. For me, it continues to beg the question why 4,500, I believe it is, permit holders do not have the ability, as we sit here today, to pay for their $43 permit online. And while I respect your view that in the near future, to me, as a member of the public and a permit holder, that's an insufficient answer. I, as a board member, think I owe it to the rest of the board and the staff and the public that we have a precise timeline, including an identification of the hardware, software that needs to be acquired, when it will be acquired, how it needs to be budgeted for, how we're getting the assistance of our sister agencies, OGS, Division of the Budget, and any number of other agencies that can help us move forward to make this happen. That's my statement.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Are you planning on entertaining a motion?
Well, I was just going to say, before we entertain any more discussion, I'd like to at least get a motion on what we have here. I need a resolution approving acceptance of credit and debit cards presented by applicants for access permit transactions. Do I have a...
Just one question on this resolution. It says, be resolved that the, whatever it is, permit by credit or debit cards will be limited to in-person payments at the Second Daughter Field Office. Now, that's not what we just heard. We just heard that you could call in.
No, to start,
So we could call in.
not as of the very first date when this takes effect. We want to start with in-person and very, very quickly, immediately move to further developing the capacity to do over the phone, and at the same time working on addressing some of the points that Mr. Rosenthal has made. And I believe we have reflected that in the revised resolution, which talks about very frequent updates that we'll be providing to the executive director and to the board about the progress that we're making. So day one, this is in person. Day one plus a very small number we hope to be by phone. And once we have formulated the kind of plan that Mr. Rosenthal described, moving, of course, to an online payment and renewal system for access permits.
Tim, I know you're in the hot seat in the middle of this, but as you're aware, this has been an incredibly frustrating process for me, and I just cannot grasp the delay. When you say in person, are permit payments due at the end of March?
Correct.
This discussion gives me no solace that people will be able in 2020 come into the office, a paltry number indeed, and pay their permit. What is the date? When will people be able to come in and pay their permit? Certainly not for the 2020 season. Am I wrong in that assumption?
Well, I believe we say 30 days from the start of, from the approval, should the board give it, of this resolution. So that puts us in the middle of February. So for at least a month, people will be able to come to the window here and pay via credit card if they choose. We understand.
I would like to have a comment from Sue Visco, who was the front line. How many people come in after third week in February to pay their permits?
I know I don't know the answer.
That's a rhetorical observation. She's
Okay.
our frontline purpose. She will know how many people actually will get the benefit of this, and I suspect it will be very, very few indeed. I'll move forward with the resolution. My frustration and my angst is well documented.
First of all, did we get a resolution?
We don't
We
have
don't
a
have a
motion
motion.
at this point.
We need a motion
Motion is second.
to approve the acceptance of credit card payments presented by applicants for access permit system transactions. Could either vote it up or down, but I need a resolution.
And it's the revised resolution that was hand-delivered to the board today and via email last night to all the board members.
I'll make a motion, we accept the revised resolution.
Do we have a second? Do we have a
I'll
second? Okay, further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Was there any idea of how much the processing fees would be on, doing the
I
transactions
believe it's 2.5% of the amount charged.
of the amount charged? And I know we're gonna do it in person, but in my business, they charge you more if you do it electronically rather than having the card physically. So I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I believe the state's program provides that the agencies shall absorb any processing
Yeah,
fees.
that's
I
good, yeah.
suspect, I hope that would be consistent in the district.
Absolutely.
That is our intention.
And stated in the policy document.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Minutia, again, this is not personal, this is an expression of my ongoing frustration that we're not in the 21st century yet.
We've heard you very clearly and directly, Mr. Rosenthal. Thank you for sharing your observations.
Yeah. Well, next, resolution to authorize the engagement of fiscal advisors and marketing incorporated in connection to the issuance of debt to finance capital projects. Mr. Manisha again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As some of you may recall, the board had authorized entering into agreement with fiscal advisors as far back as December 2009. We worked well with them for many years to prepare for the possibility of issuing debt to finance our infrastructure improvements. As time went along, the board chose to enter into an agreement with the Environmental Facilities Corporation in 2017 for the financing of work undertaken at Conklinville that did not require the assistance of fiscal advisors. So as we sit here today, we anticipate additional construction work to be done, not just at Conklinville, but at other places in accordance with the capital plan that Rob Fulton works on every day, twice on Sunday. And we want to be prepared for the possibility that that work needs to be financed via debt, and that's why we are asking for this particular approval to enter into this agreement, so that when we're ready to finance, we have all of the documents in place and all the agreements in place. Given the amount of money that is involved here, this falls within the discretionary threshold of the district, and so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, and otherwise seek your approval to enter into this agreement.
Do I have
I'll
a
make
motion?
that motion.
Do we give, I'm sorry. Second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Now, will we get a resolution with specific numbers at some point?
So we have in the last clause a not to exceed $14,625.
Okay. Any further questions and comments then? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you all.
Staff and committee reports, General Counsel, Mr. Lester.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I continue to work with representatives of the Executive Chamber, DC, the APA, and the Lake George Park Commission to review their Lake George Park Commission's effort to revise their stormwater management regs at the request of the Chamber. I also would like to report on efforts to comply with Executive Law 100A, through which we report the number of agency authorities and directors subject to the financial disclosure and the gender of those board members and employees. Just a number they wanted out there. I've also worked to match each board policy with the resolution adopting that board policy, and should be in the position in the next couple of months to come forward to the executive director and the board with a proposal to continue certain of those resolutions and discontinue those policies that are no longer relevant to our operations. Other than that, I've basically been doing the work in the district. That is my report.
Mr. Leslie,
Yep.
do we get to keep, in the records thing, do we get to keep copies at least? Oh.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
With regard to the state archives, coming to take our records, do we get to keep copies for our own use and any member of the public?
That is an ongoing project. It's been a little bit dormant during the holiday season, largely because I was taking advantage of the holiday to do other things. We will keep any record that we need immediate access to. We will either keep here or make a paper or electronic copy of that record. Those records that we don't need on an immediate basis, we will send to state archives.
And let me add to that if I may. We are 100% the arbiter of what we entrust to their care and what we retain. They have been invited by us to come in and help us protect and preserve these important documents on behalf of the people of the state of New York. So we are not going to let anything go out the door that we don't feel comfortable entrusting to their care, if that helps.
Very much so. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Leslie? If not, we'll move on to Compliance Officer, Mr. Zicki.
Thank you. My report can be found on page 17 and includes items that have been addressed or accomplished since our last meeting. Just a couple of things I'd like to take time to highlight. Last month we had discussed the dump trucks and the retrofit that was required. I did submit and I have received approval from DEC for the useful life waiver, which will allow us to keep those dump trucks on the road at the latest December 31st of 2020. And then we'll have to have an alternative plan. The MWBE third quarter report was submitted. Our utilization for the last quarter was in excess of $41,153. It includes payments to Gallows Robinson, Baker PR, Ryan Biggs, and a final payment for our roofing company, General Roofing. On pages 18 and 19 are the contract status sheets. Please take time to review those, as that satisfies the public authority requirement. If you have any questions, if not, that completes my report.
Any questions from the board? Comments? Thank you very much. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Manisha again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CFO report starts on page 20 of your packet. We, at the end of December, have reached the halfway point of the district's fiscal year. On a combined basis, the district had a little over $5.7 million of cash on hand. That's about $118,000 above the same period last year, roughly 2.1%. That is in large measure a result not of things this year, but of things last year. A couple of payments that normally come in November and December did not come in until January last year, so we expect to see that differential be cleared up when we report to you next about the district's finances. In fact, if you look at where we were through the first 6 months of this year and the first 6 months of last year, once you make that adjustment, we're just a few $1,000s apart. So there's a lot more there for anybody to delve into, but I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have about the district's finances.
Any questions from the board? If not, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chief Engineer, Mr. Folke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report's on page 42. The month of December, we worked diligently to release the water that we received at the month previously, and the graphs probably are the best indication of that success through the month of December, with all the reservoirs down close to their historic average by the end of the month. And with the exception of Sacandaga, Great Sacandaga Lake is about 10 feet above the historic currently. And in the Hudson River area, in December we had about 80% of historic average precip and made a 126% of average release at Great Sacandaga Lake and 114% of historic average, 126% of inflow at Great Sacandaga Lake and 114% at Indian, and 150% and 188% of historic average release respectively. In the Black River area, we had about 80% of historic average precip, and Stillwater had an 83% of historic average inflow and a release of 156%. Again, getting us down closer to the historic average elevation. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions? By the way, whoever gave me that fertilizer, thank you. I didn't see where, all of a sudden it appeared here. I didn't see it. Thank you.
Magic of the district.
Our Chief Administrator, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 72. Emergency Action Plan annual training was conducted for all the facilities, along with the surveillance monitoring test for the year. Staff members on vacation and the holidays, I assisted with dowel valve operations and piezometer readings at Conklinville Dam. And yes, Mr. Hayes, I still remember how to do it. Let's see, and I was hoping I would never have to say this under my watch, but Sue Visco, as John mentioned, is retiring on January 24th. As a lot of you know, she's been a great member of the team, and I think she knew just about every permit member around the lake. As my time as administrator, she's been my backbone here. When I come out of the office and needed something, she already knew what I needed before I even asked. And I always called her radar. So she's been a great asset. I'm really gonna miss her. And she's really gonna be greatly missed. And I do have her home phone. So, with that, Stephanie Porter, our administrative assistant, is taking the reins. She's coming along very well and very comfortable with the transition that's taken place, and she'll be filling Sue's shoes, and we'll be moving forward from there. And I'll be glad to take any questions anybody may have.
Any questions? Is it appropriate for the board to entertain a motion of thanking?
Sure.
Thanking for all her efforts and.
Can we ask maybe Sue to come in?
So moved.
Let's ask her to join us for a moment. and
Sue, you got
give
something?
give her a round of applause.
Sorry, put on the spot.
I guess you just did.
We would just like to, I'd like to entertain a motion that we congratulate Sue on her retirement and thank her for all her years of service.
Thank you.
I make that motion and add how much I will personally miss interfacing with her on so many occasions.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
I miss you all too.
A second to that?
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I always go back to the time I said nobody's here. But there was always somebody here when I came in.
Yes, there was.
Yes.
Even though it wasn't who you were looking for.
Which is really what I meant to say then.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you for everything. Any other board member questions or comments? Our next board meeting,
February 11th. Oh, I'm sorry.
March, right?
March 10th.
March 10th,
Yeah, March.
March 10th in,
Mayfield.
right here,
Back here.
March 10th here. Motion?
I will.
Go ahead.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That's our next one. Motion to adjourn?
Who was the motion and second?
Dick was,
I did.
You made the
And,
motion
and I seconded.
okay, thank you.
Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second?
I will.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.